Welcome. I'm really glad to see so many people who are interested in leadership because leadership is so key to everything we do, helping the animals. I'd like actually to start by asking, I like to know exactly or generally who I'm speaking to. So I'd like a few shows of hands here. Could we have you just raise your hands if you lead more than 20 people, either as staff or key volunteers? Could I have hands up? Quite a few people, that's wonderful, great. Okay, now how many people lead, say, between 6 and 20? Okay, great. And finally, how many are less than 6? Okay, all right, well, one of the reasons I wanted to know that is because many of the points which we're going to be making apply differently depending on what you're leading, you know, what the nature of your organization is, what the size of your organization is, how many employees or volunteers. And I do want to include volunteers in this because it's just as important to lead volunteers as it is your own staff. And I think there are some points which will apply absolutely to everyone, almost apply even if you don't lead anyone, they apply. And there are some points which will really only apply to larger organizations. So bear that in mind, and of course, all of you who lead smaller organizations, hopefully they're going to get bigger and bigger, so one day you'll be up in the 20-plus category. So bear all these points in mind, but at the same time, if I'll switch them around, I'll vary them so they don't get too boring for anyone who is in a smaller organization, for instance. We're going to be going through a bunch of different subjects related to leadership, and I'll just outline what these general subjects are. First, I'm going to start at a fairly high level and talk about high-level leadership issues. We're going to talk about whether it's a question of you're born to lead or whether you learn to lead, or how all that works. We're going to talk about decision-making and holding meetings and how to make decisions. We're going to talk about people and how you relate to people, your people. Communication, which is really important. And finally, the commitment which you make as a leader to your organization and beyond that to your people. So those are the general subjects we're going to discuss. I do want to, I'm going to use myself and my experiences as examples more than picking, I don't really want the obvious sort of leaders to pick are politicians, but who wants to spend an hour and a half talking about politicians? Let's not do that. And, we will veer off into things like Adolf Hitler if we're not careful. So let's steer clear of that. So I'm going to give you examples from my own experience. I'll be talking about my own experience, things I've learned, et cetera, and I hope that helps you. So let's start at the high level. Let's start at the 30,000-foot level. And I mean, a good question is, I need to get my controller here. A good question to ask is, why leaders? Why do we need leaders? Well, I think it's kind of human nature that whatever the nature of the leadership, and there are varieties of different kinds of leadership, that everyone needs leaders. If we're going to get something done, we need leaders from a variety of different points of view, and there are various different components to this high level of leadership. The first one which I identify, and it is possibly the most important thing, is the drive which leaders provide to their organizations and their people. Having someone who is capable of providing kind of motive force is one way of looking at it. It's like the engine which drives, the whole organization. It's possibly the single most important thing. And when I've looked around the animal welfare movement, where I've seen success happening, there's always a key individual, most often the obvious named leader, whatever that title is, executive director or whatever it may be, who that person has really brought about the change that a successful, or actually it applies to unsuccessful as well, situations. There's always that important element, the driving force. So, not everyone is capable of doing that. There are things, and we'll get to this more, that you can learn about it, but a lot of it is it's in your persona, it's in your personality, it's in the way you relate to people. So bear that in mind as one of the high-level, most important things there is. A second really important thing is vision. And when I speak about vision, I'm talking about the long-term picture, the highest level picture of what you're trying to do. Best Friends, as an example, has defined its vision, and it's part of its whole strategic planning exercise as bringing about a time when there are no more I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up already. Excuse me. It's what Asher quoted this morning. It's a better life through kindness to animals, a better world through kindness to animals. That's our vision. That's our big picture vision. It's sort of, the world. I mean, it's if you like, it's megalomaniacal. I don't know if you feel that way, but and visions need to have that kind of quality of huge scope. Now, it may be huge scope within a limited area. We're talking about the world. We don't define the world as the globe and all its inhabitants. I mean, that would be nice. But whatever your area of activity is, think about, as a leader, think about your long-term vision, where you'd like to be. It's where you're going towards. It's nothing to do with how you get to that vision. That comes later. It's just the big-scale vision of what you want to achieve. So that's the second most important high-level thing. The third is simply direction. Direction for your organization. This is where you start getting into strategies and tactics and defining what you're there for. And one thing I would say, I'm not talking now, strategic planning is a big part of leadership. Having a strategy is a big part of being able to lead. But this is not a workshop about strategic planning. But I would say that a really important thing is to define what your strategy is, your long-term strategy is. And don't get too down into the weeds. That's when you start getting to tactics. The difference between strategy and tactics is strategy is kind of overall. Tactics is the nuts and bolts of how you carry out that strategy. So when you're thinking about the initial stage of giving direction to your organization, the first thing you need to think about is and this is the first stage really of strategic planning once you've defined the vision, is what is the strategy which you're going to use in order to achieve your vision. Just to give you an example, one of Best Friends' major guiding strategies at the moment is dividing the country up into regions. We want to have more impact throughout the entire country. There's a strategy right there. Having more impact throughout the entire country. It may be having more impact throughout your county or your city or wherever you're operating. But that's how Best Friends describes its strategy, and then an addition to that is the first step in the tactics, but it's really part of the strategy, which is that of dividing the country into sections, having a center in each of those regional centers is what we're calling them, and then moving from there out into the rest of the country. So our strategy is to achieve our vision, which is a better world through kindness to animals, by creating within this country, we've limited it to this country, regional centers in order to do that work in the different regions. Now, I made an important point there. We've limited it. When you're directing your organization and when you have defined your strategy, or even it applies within a particular tactic, bear in mind what you should not be doing. It's very, people call it mission drift. And it's kind of going off the rails, maybe even just slightly. This arises sometimes particularly when you have donors who have an interest in what you do, who may be big donors. They may be some of your biggest donors. And they naturally have some influence, and they should. They should have some say in what you do. But if it gets to the point when they want you to do something which you just do not want to do as an organization. It's not, it may be relevant, but it's not what you've decided you are going to do, then you sometimes have to make those hard decisions to shut something like that down. I'll give you an example. In the earlier days of Best Friends, we did quite a little, we never really focused on this greatly, but we had a whole department that did humane education in schools and related to young people. We decided after a while, when we were finding down our mission about 6 or so years ago, we decided that that was something which we were not doing on a very big scale. We felt that it was an important component of helping the animals, but we didn't feel that we were really well equipped to do it without building a much bigger department. We also looked around and we saw that there were organizations who were pretty good at this. They focused on it. That was their mission, to educate and to go into the schools and so on. So we decided, okay, we will not focus on that at all. We will limit it. Now, we had people who were very enthusiastic about humane education, came to us and said, you know, and in some cases, and there have been other examples of this as well, I want you to do this, and here's $100,000 to do it. Well, you gulp. If you don't, if it's not part of your mission, do you turn away $100,000? Well, frankly, to be honest, I have turned away as much as $250,000 for, not for that particular thing, but for other things, which I didn't feel were right. They didn't fit with the organization's policy. They didn't fit with the organization's strategy and tactics, and they were just wrong. And it was a tough decision. Of course, it was a very tough decision. It was a very tough conversation to have to that very generous person who, you know, was very supportive of Best Friends, wanted to help us and wanted us to do this particular thing. So, but I felt that for the organization's overall benefit, that would be the start of a journey down a slippery slope. If you start bending your mission, it's easy for it just to get out of control. And then you lose the focus that you've got. You lose the ability to really achieve what you're there to achieve and what you defined as being there to achieve. So bear that in mind. Bear in mind what does not fit into your mission just as much as what does fit into your mission. And then you'll be able to provide, I'm going to be talking later about making decisions in collaboration with other members of your staff and other leaders within your organization, but I want to make it clear that you're there to provide direction. Make sure you get other people's opinions. We'll talk a bit more about that. But at the same time, once it's defined, you're there to help the whole organization follow down the railroad tracks, if you like. Let's pause at this point. That's kind of the main things I want to say about the really high level, 30,000-foot level of this. As we go through these different sections, I'll pause in case anyone has any questions. So does anyone have any questions now about what we've talked about so far? Raise your hand if you do. Don't have to. If I've said it all and you've understood it, no problem. Okay, I don't see any hands. Have I missed anyone? No. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next section then. And this is other aspects which are we're still pretty high level here. On why leaders. Now, to provide inspiration is a big one. Providing inspiration to your people, again, is part of that drive. It's part of the motive force, inspiring people to do what you do and what you need to do in order to get your mission accomplished. A big part of this, I feel, stems from what's in your heart. And I think that slide's a little bit later. Let's see if we can go back. But it was actually a good answer to the question, what's in your heart? No, okay, we have to go through all this again. I'm very sorry here. Let's see. Okay, should be there. There we go. Oh, no, it's the next one. No, okay, it's missing. All right, I'll just give it to you verbally. As I say, that's a good answer to what's in your heart, right? Okay. My point is really, this is such a passionate field. You know, we all feel it. We all feel it so passionately, how much the help the animals need. We all love the animals. It's very emotional. It's very intuitive, and it comes from our gut, you know, and it comes from, hey, I'm getting my metaphors mixed up here, heart, gut, not quite the same thing, but, but you know what I'm saying. It's what we feel, it's what we're driven to do, it takes us to lengths which we would never go to unless we felt so deeply about it. And it's really that which drives your ability to inspire other people. Now, this is something which is either there or it's not. I think some people do change. I know many people have said to me over the years, I didn't grow up with animals and had much to do with them, but I've just had some experiences which really have moved me, you know, and I've really got to feel it. So it does come on you late. In fact, I have a really interesting story from some visitors to Best Friends Animal Sanctuary who were, it was an elderly gentleman, he was about 90 years old, and his daughter was a supporter of Best Friends, knew us quite well, had been there before, but he hadn't. And they'd been touring in the area around the national parks there. And they visited the sanctuary, and they didn't have very much time. This 90-year-old gentleman had, you know, he'd been kind of a little bit worn out by his daughter going through the national parks, I think. But they came to Angel's Rest. Angel's Rest, for those of you who haven't been there, is our pet cemetery. It's an absolutely spectacularly peaceful and tranquil location. It has just an extraordinary atmosphere. We have there are numerous animal graves there, because obviously over the years, you know, many animals have passed away with us. We have in a couple of, we have wind chimes which gently sound their beautiful sounds. We have a little gazebo in the middle where you can go and sit and just think and feel and contemplate. The gentleman was sitting there, and his daughter was walking around in different parts of the site. And the manager of that, who works there, happened to be there, and he went up to this elderly gentleman and said, you know, enjoying it? How is it? And the elderly gentleman was very pensive. He was in a very pensive mood, and he looked around. He looked around the whole area slowly, and he said, you know, I've never had a pet. I really missed something, didn't I? And John, the manager, just tapped him on the shoulder and walked away. Enough had been expressed, enough had been said. He got something into his heart in that little moment. He was 90 years old. I don't know what happened to him after that. I've lost touch with him. But I'm sure that was a really special moment for him in his entire life. So it can be acquired, is what I'm saying. But unless it's there, unless it's been with you forever, or unless it's come into your life, you're really not going to be able to inspire people, because that's the wellspring of inspiration. So I think there are other levels of leadership which don't really depend on being inspiring in quite the same way, or driving. I'm thinking more of management type of situations where you're maybe managing a large team of people, and you know, management is an art in itself, which is not necessarily quite the same thing as leading. When I talk about leading, I'm talking about, as I said, providing that motive force, that inspiration, that drive. I think where we can go from here is into the next section, which is about whether you're born or whether you learn to lead. This is kind of a crucial and sort of critical question, because if you're not born to lead and that's the only way of leading, then anyone who hasn't been born to lead, forget it. You're not going to do it. So let's ask some questions about designed to get at whether it's a very natural thing for you. Do you naturally are you the kind of person who naturally takes charge? And so do other people look to you for leadership? I'm hoping that many of you understand this concept, because it is very helpful if it's a very natural thing. I don't think it has to be. It has to be born into you. We'll talk about learning in a minute, but it's a very good quality if you're able to simply be the kind of person who just naturally takes charge. All these questions are relevant, and you're good to ask yourself. Do others look to you for leadership? When you walk into a room and do people's, charisma is something which turns people's heads. Charisma is often aligned with leadership. It's not necessary that, not many people say, oh, I'm charismatic. If they do, they're probably not. But at the same time, if you do have that kind of natural charisma, that natural presence, you turn heads when people come into the room, then where do you go from there? You've certainly got the start of, a considerable ability to lead. And many people do. But there's other kind of factors here, like, if you're in a situation where people are trying to do something, there's a group of people, maybe there's a group of volunteers who are trying to do something, and there's no real person who stands out, except someone then comes in, another volunteer joins and sees that no one is sort of really telling people what to do. They haven't got direction, they're not really moving, not really doing anything. And they start feeling very uncomfortable because someone who, actually everyone in that situation is feeling uncomfortable, but I'm thinking of a person who is a kind of natural leader, who comes in and senses immediately that there's no leadership and immediately jumps to drive the bus. That kind of person. Now, if you've got that quality, and I'm not sure that you can learn things about it, you can certainly learn to perceive when it's needed, whether you can just naturally step into that leadership position and have everyone regard you as their leader in that situation is another question. You're going to have to manifest something in order for that to happen. And this is where natural authority. Let me again give you one of my experiences. As is probably obvious, I grew up in England. English society has certain aspects of it which kind of expect certain leaders to, and this is a traditional viewpoint which goes back centuries actually to the old days of the British Empire, where they expect certain kind of people from certain aspects of it. It's a class-ridden society, which actually one of the reasons I left. But anyway, I'm digressing a little here. I was privileged to go to a private school, a boarding school. They call them public schools there, which is really confusing. You have to understand that for a start. And one of the sort of cultural factors about those schools is that the culture regards them as a place which nurtures leaders, which creates leaders and nurtures leaders. And I hesitate to say, yeah, I'm a born leader, no doubt about it. That's in the I'm charismatic character category. But I do have this quality. I do have this quality, and I think it came up in the school system, and it was developed in the school system. I became what they call there a prefect, which is a boy, it was all boys school those days, who obviously shows some authority and kind of order the other boys around. So I was into that position. So it became something which I sort of naturally took on. Now, there may not be parallels in the American school system, I'm sure there aren't, but there probably are some actually. And to what degree that kind of, you can relate to that, I don't know. But I hope it gives you some idea of what my own experiences were. And subsequent to that, there have been times when I've been in a really significant leadership position and times when I haven't. And it's very helpful actually to be able to, even if you are a leader type, to be able to step down from that and watch other people. And you can learn from that, watch other people taking the lead in situations. So another factor, I think, which we're moving in the direction now of what about it being learned? What exactly can you learn? If you don't feel that you just naturally step in, how much can you actually take on? And there is a lot. One factor, though, that's kind of an intermediary factor is that of being mentored. If you have the ability to connect with someone who can mentor you in your leadership role, it's of tremendous value, as long as they're good mentors. If you can establish that kind of relationship with people, with a person, it's best, I think, if it's one person who you have a particular affinity with, and who has an affinity for you and desires to do that. It is really helpful to be able to communicate things as a leader about your work, about your organization, about the position which you take in it, about problems that you have, which you may not know how to deal with. And that can give you a little bit more than just knowledge, a little bit more than just facts. Well, I would do it this way. I would do it that way. You know, when I was in a situation similar to this is what I did. It really worked. Or this is what I did. It really didn't work. You know, all of that is part of mentoring. But there's another thing as well, which you really need to seek out if you're looking for a mentor, which is that they have the ability to give you confidence. They have the ability to pump you up, if you like. The ability to make you feel, you know, that you're just that little bit more capable and competent and able to handle whatever problem, able to find a solution to whatever problems is facing you. So mentorship, if you can find a mentor, if you have one, if you don't have one, actually there are some, in certain areas there are some ways of finding a mentor which are kind of established where, say, retired executives get together, and there are organizations which supply retired executives to guide, and they do it pro bono usually, these kind of arrangements. You can seek out that kind of advice and help. And that can turn into something which is very practical and not really true mentoring, it's just education. Or it can turn into something where you have a real kind of relationship. It depends on the individuals and it depends on you. But look for that. Now, as far as learning is concerned, there are tons of books that have been written on leadership. And I'm not going to recommend you any of them, because there's so many. You know, get online. I'm sure there's a lot of online resources as well. Go to your local bookstore if you can find one still in existence, and you know, look for. I'd recommend this. It's helpful if you feel that you can get some particular pointers. In my experience, I've learned more actually from individuals than from reading. Now, that may be something about me. I do read quite a lot. I like to read. I like to learn from reading. But I've learned more actually from direct interaction with people who have taught me some principles of leadership. And I have definitely learned stuff I didn't know, even with the benefit of that English public school education, which didn't really, I mean, it wasn't conscious. They didn't say, okay, now we're going to teach you to be leaders and you need to know this, 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 and this. Didn't happen like that. It was much more subtle than that. But anyway, even without the benefit of that, there was a lot I didn't know about leadership. We'll probably be covering a few things as we go through this, actually, about that. But let me think. Just to give you an example. I really wasn't too conscious of talking about things in front of other people and the effect of talking to about things in front of other people. As a leader, you may, of an organization, and probably the bigger it gets, the more significant this is, there are some things which people, you know, under you don't necessarily need to know. There are other things which people definitely do need to know, and you need to be conscious of that dynamic. In some cases, it'll be damaging to the organization to tell certain people certain things. I'm sorry, I'm being very theoretical about this, but I think you get what I mean. I wasn't very conscious of that. And someone pointed it out to me who played in any way a formal mentoring role, but was there around me a lot and was able to give me pointers. And they really showed me the importance of that particular point, which is to be aware of who you're talking to, be aware of what you're saying to people and what is useful, who needs to know what is useful, etc. And you can do damage by telling people. You can start rumors, you can start gossiping. If they don't get the full picture, they just hear something. So don't necessarily have all the conversations you want to have with other people in your group in front of everyone. You know, that's an example of something. You can easily learn that. It doesn't have to be natural. And there are other things like that. We're going to start talking about styles of leadership in this now. yeah, let's go on with that, and then I'll ask if there are any more questions about this whole area of learning versus being a natural leader. This is getting into styles of leadership, and top down or bottom up. What is meant by that in this context is, do you tell everyone what to do and not really ever consult anyone about what is required, whatever the situation is? And are you kind of like just ordering people around? Let's put it that way. That's top down. Bottom up is a lot of consultation with people. It's allowing direction, allowing in a whole number of things, allowing tactics, allowing things to rise from with the consultation of people below you. Now, that's always a good idea, frankly, and I think it's sort of built into our culture in this country to be consultative in that kind of way and collaborative, as opposed to very ordering people around. I think that doesn't fit so well in our culture, and I would certainly say my recommendation is that bottom up is more successful. But there are times when you need to, you can't do it all that way. It just becomes a big mishmash. Say you've got a lot of disagreement amongst people, and that's legitimate. The best tactic there is to allow that disagreement to be expressed in a relevant context, in a relevant group of people. But not necessarily to let, if it's a recipe for a totally static situation because no one can decide what to do because everyone's got different opinions, the organization is going to go nowhere. So there are times when you need to decide between options, and at that point you're going to be top down. You're going to be being top down. And if you are set up with the appropriate leadership authority, and when I say set up, you have, it's your role within the organization, and you have the authority and you feel the natural authority to do that, that's not a problem. It's best to make it clear to people that this is going on. I had a mentor a short while ago who worked at the US Fund for UNICEF, and he was on their senior leadership team, that his president was a person who was running the show, was running the organization, and said at the outset of pulling this team together, or it was when he first joined it, and it was probably half a dozen people. It wasn't a very big team. These were the senior leaders of the organization. And the president said to the team, I am always going to consult with you. I am always going to listen to you. But don't be surprised if I don't take your advice and I just say, this is the way it's going to be. But I will always listen to you first. I think that's really good advice. And even if it goes to the extent of, having some battles in your team, having some, set tos and arguments about things, it's even not bad to allow that. I mean, don't let it get out of hand and get physical or anything like that, but allow communication, allow expression. Otherwise, things will fester. There will be disagreement amongst people in the team, and unless you handle that, it's going to stay there. It's not going to go away. It won't go away naturally. But if you have an understanding, and it's one of the terms that you set this team up with, that you've got to agree, if you're the leader, you say to them, you've got to agree that I will, having expressed yourself, having told me what you feel is best in this situation, if I just ignore that and say, no, we're going a different way, I've heard you, we're going a different way, then you're okay with that. And if your team is not okay with it, or members of your team is not okay with it, you haven't got quite the right team together. You need that kind of agreement and cooperation amongst your whole team to be able to be effective. So once a decision is made, look for support, expect support, require support. of your team, even if they disagree. So that's an important aspect, I think, of this whole concept of top-down, bottom-up. Let's move on. Let's pause there, actually, at this point and see whether anyone has any questions on anything I've said so far. Anyone got any questions? Nope, not seeing any questions still. God, I'm doing really well. I take it as a compliment. Okay, well, let's move on to decision making. This is a very important aspect of things. The bigger your organization, the more likely you're to be having meetings. And let's look at different ways in which you make decisions in meetings. Okay, we can break this down a little bit with some numbers. The majority, obviously, I guess I'm missing a greater than sign there, because 50% isn't a majority, but it's close. It should have a greater than 50% sign there. So if that's one way of making decisions. What you look for, and this is the way, unless it's government often works on this kind of decision-making basis. How many votes do you got? Sometimes you need a 2/3 majority or something set up. But basically, getting 51% is enough in this kind of setup to make decisions. We'll talk about which is the best way to do this in a minute. Consensus is another, where you can put that percentage where you want, but it's got to be somewhere around 70%. When you feel that you've got consensus from your decision-making team on a particular direction to go. And 70+% is pretty good. You can feel pretty confident that you've got some good, strong, solid support. If you've got 51%, that's a different story. You're really on the edge there. Unanimous, okay, you may decide that we're only going to do things if we have a unanimous decision, which is 100%, so everyone. Now, that provides pretty big limitations on your decision making. You're probably going to have to do a lot more work. You're probably going to have to make a lot more compromises, which is not always a good thing. Compromise is certainly helpful in certain situations, but when it comes to requiring unanimity in order to decide a course of action, that's a pretty big limitation. And finally, dictatorship. I'm trying to simplify this decision-making thing as much as possible. That's how you make decisions. These are roughly your options. You can define consensus differently. Majority should, I suppose, be 51%. And so, what are the factors here that affect you? Well, I've already talked about the difficulty of getting unanimity. I wouldn't recommend that. It's nice to have, and the more you can drive towards it, the better. At Best Friends, we work hard to get it, but there's also another dynamic which creeps into this kind of situation, which is, are people going to express their disagreement? Even if they disagree, are they going to express their disagreement? Are they going to read the writing on the wall and see that they're the only person who feels differently and just shut up and say, yeah, I vote for it too? That does kind of happen, especially if you're looking for unanimity. And it's not ideal. You want to be able to, you want to have an atmosphere, you want to create an atmosphere in your team where they will express everything that they've got to express, and that it's acceptable to do that. It's okay. It's okay to disagree, even with the boss. I would say that insisting on unanimity does have that vulnerability that people may not be willing to do that, because they know that's what's got to happen in order for the situation to move. So that's not ideal. Having a majority has its own weaknesses as well, because you really haven't got that much support. You've only got half plus a little bit of the team's support. That's not really great. So we come, and do we need to talk about dictatorship? Probably not. Unless you are such a benign individual and you're so great that everyone just falls in line behind you, not unwillingly, but absolutely delightedly. then I don't think I know anyone like that. So that method I think we could rule out right away. So we come down to consensus. And consensus building, I think, is I mean, it's what I recommend as an approach to leadership, where you're looking to get as close to unanimity as you can, you're looking to get as high a consensus as you can, but you do create an atmosphere where you allow disagreement, you allow expression, you require expression of opinions. And you know, this takes some juggling, it takes some working, it depends how big your team is. The bigger the team, the more complex it gets, obviously. But it's workable in any group, really. And ultimately, the decision is going to be yours as to whether you've reached unanimity, consensus or not. Because that 70% figure is I feel it's really at the low end. But you could say 2/3 is consensus. But I feel that's a little low. I think it needs to be more than 70% personally. So what do you do if you haven't got that? If you've got, you know, maybe some of the disagreements with the idea that you've got are not, okay, no, I don't want to do that, no, because of this, never. It's not as strong as that. It's just kind of objections and so on. You can usually work through that as long as it's all expressed and people react to their responses and so on. And then people will say, well, okay, yeah, that'll work if this or if that. You know, you may start making some compromises in whatever the subject you're discussing is. These are the kind of tools you need in order to build consensus if you don't have it off the bat. But generally speaking, if you have the strength to be able to command the following once you've made that decision, you can bring those dissenters along behind you. And if you've got someone who consistently dissents and argues and is against what you've got in mind and what the rest of the team has got in mind, then they probably don't belong there. It's probably not going to be comfortable. So then you've got some other tough decisions to face about what you do about that. We'll come to that a bit later. But I think one thing that's really, there are some things here which are really important to kind of bear in mind about this, and I've sort of covered it. Well, this first point I haven't covered, actually. One thing which is really important when you get together, and this is really the conduct of meetings now, what are you actually doing in the situation of a meeting where you're discussing what course of action to take? In a leadership team of an organization, there are these different functions. Sometimes you want to inform the team of something that's happened. Maybe your board has dictated that something particular happened, and it'll be your job as the leader of that team to convey what the board has said needs to happen. Maybe you need information from someone who is, let me give you an example. We have someone who's in charge of all our technology, our IT. We have a CIO. You know, that's a very technical world. A lot happens. A lot happens in a sense in a silo, although we could talk about silos and they're not a good thing, but inevitably that happens when it's a very technical area, that a lot happens in that IT silo. But at the same time, the whole point is whatever the work they're doing, it affects the whole organization. So other people need to know about it. So there are times when in our team, we need to know things that have been going on in the technology department. We need to know what's been happening, what decisions have been made, how it affects the rest of the organization, what cooperation they need, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll say to our CIO, okay, you've got half an hour to tell us your latest. That's a pure informing situation. It's not, it's right that the decisions which have been made in that department have been made there. It doesn't involve anyone else. It may involve getting some information from the rest of the organization as to how something will work best or not. But basically, the decisions that are made there appropriately. So they need to be passed on to the rest of the organization. That's a pure informing situation. Are you brainstorming? This is a completely different thing. Brainstorming is not deciding, it's not making decisions, it's not determining a course of action. It's working out ideas. It's throwing in, well, you know what brainstorming is. It's gathering as much of the ideas and thoughts and input and tossing them around and batting them backwards and forwards and eliminating some and supporting others, etc. It's a course in the direction of deciding, but it's not the same as deciding. And finally, and there may be other modes, but I think these are the important ones, deciding is when you actually come down to what I was talking about a moment ago, about how do you make decisions, etc. And that's when you actually get to the meat of making decisions as to what is going to happen and what is going to move forward. Excuse me. Before you tackle a subject, or even it may apply to the entire meeting, make sure it's clear both in your head and also in other people's heads as to what you are trying to do in that situation. Because otherwise it'll get confused. You know, some people may think, well, we're making decisions here, and other people may just think, well, we're brainstorming. And that will get into a very confused situation with the people who've got the idea wrong. So, you know, this, again, we're talking now about some practical things which, this stuff is pretty easy to learn. This is not necessarily you're born with it. I'm not sure that anyone is born with the idea of going to meetings or how to conduct meetings. It's just not part of being born. Anyway, you know what I mean. But that is really important. Now, we've talked a bit about, well, place for all and collaboration. This is really more on the subject which we were talking about a moment ago, of making sure you get all opinions out. There is a place for all people who truly belong in the group, and not necessarily everyone does, but the people who do truly belong in whatever this group is you're working with. There's a place for everyone, and there should be a place for everyone's opinions to be expressed and talked about, as I was saying. So be open to that. Sometimes you have to sit and listen to nonsense. You've probably all done it. And you have to actually be prepared to let it happen. You know, sometimes actually good ideas come out of nonsense. All sorts of things can happen. There are all sorts of dynamics like that which can happen. But if you're not open to listening in the first place, then you're shutting all that down. You're shutting all sorts of possibilities down. Not a good idea. And collaboration works. This is really what I've been talking about, collaborating with other people on your team. Making sure that their opinions are both respected, are expressed, come out, and establishing understandings about what is going on in the situation, and if you know, you ultimately, as the leader, make the decision when there's some disagreement, making sure that everyone understands that, and are prepared to collaborate with that idea, with that concept. But the more you can engage other people, the more you can listen to other people, even if you have to just, you know, ultimately make a different decision than they're advocating, the more everything will work more smoothly. You'll have a better future ahead of you. You'll have cooperation from people. You'll have people following you rather than sort of going off, you know, and then talking in the corridors with some people they may know, etc., who agree with them. And as Ashley was saying this morning, we're all looking for people and things and everything that agree with us. So avoid that as much as you can by allowing expression and listening to what people have to say. Okay, so let's move on from there. I think I'm going to start talking about people now and your relations with people. We've been talking about some of that, but we're going to talk about some other aspects of it. Surround yourself, get the right people on the bus. I think it's a commonly held principle, and I would absolutely say, in my personal experience, it's 100% true, that it's not just you, it's your people that make your organization. Now, you have big responsibilities as a leader of that organization to do all sorts of things, but getting the right people in the right positions, doing the right thing, is absolutely essential to a smooth running, effective, and say expanding or effective organization. I've had experiences when people may have been qualified to do the work that they may have the technical qualifications if that's required. They may have the experience if that's required. But there's something wrong. They don't have this, they're not in tune with maybe with your culture. They're not in tune with your ideas. They may have all sorts of technical abilities to bring to the table, but they're not the right people in the right place. We're edging here into the area of hiring and firing. I'm not going to say a lot about hiring and firing because I think the commonly expressed reality that to hire slowly and fire quickly is good advice. Not all those kind of aphorisms is good advice, but that one is. Make sure, do your utmost to find that the person fits, that the person, in addition to having experience and technical qualifications and technical knowledge, in addition to that, fits well and has ideas which are going to fit, and is of a personality type which will coalesce well with your organization. Absolutely vital. And you will wind up saying, when you have got that situation, it's all of us doing this. It's not me. You may get a lot of the kudos, but you really feel, and this is what you want to aim at. You want to aim at genuinely and really feeling that you couldn't do it without all of them. No way could you do it without all of them. You play a key role in making sure they're coalesced, they're on the right track, they're a team that's working together. But no way could you do it. You will genuinely feel that. It's not just words which come out of your mouth, it's real. If you have the right people on the bus doing the right thing. I thought there were some other bullets there. Let me just check. Yeah, okay. There were. I don't know if this is working or not. Maybe not. It's not doing anything now. No? Okay, they're not there. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was missing, is delegation. As you grow, as you do more, you may find that you just can't handle everything that you've been doing. As you take on more in your organization, that's very likely to happen. You have to delegate to other people so that they can take care of different aspects of whatever the work is. And you just can't, you may have been very strong into the details, when you were able to handle them all. You may have had very strong opinions about them, and your opinions may have been very good. But if you're growing and expanding, believe me, you will reach a point where you can't attend to all the details that you once did. The answer to that is delegation. And delegation is an art. Being able to have the trust in other people to make decisions which you previously made and believe in them, and just have a comfort with them making those decisions or them providing that direction to their team, whatever that team is. That's something which sometimes, particularly if you've been involved in it before, you have to work to kind of extract yourself from and allow those people to make the running. It is an art. And if you find, and sometimes you'll find they make decisions which you've given the authority to make, but they make the wrong ones. Or you feel they make the wrong ones. And you're probably right. I'm thinking of a situation where you are right. Okay, what do you do? Well, you discuss it with them, you call them in, if it depends on what the circumstances are, if something can be changed, okay, you have the authority to change their decisions, fair enough. Consider the implications of doing that. It may be that they've set their team up in going in a particular direction and they've started on that direction, you hear about it and you want to change it. Think about the effect that's going to have on that team. These are all things that can be learned. And if you build, it takes time, but if you build the kind of trust in your team where the other leaders really do things which they're in tune with you, so they understand what you want without really having to ask you necessarily. This is the kind of fabric that you need to construct. And this is where the art comes in. It is an art. But it's one which, if you're conscious of what's going on and what is needed, you can develop. So delegation is a vital thing. It'll take a big load off your mind, and closely related to that is just advice to stay out of the weeds, is often the expression that's used. It's a good one. Just don't, try and construct situations where you don't need to be in the weeds, where you've trained people, you've explained what you want, what direction you want, what things you believe in, what things you don't believe in. Try and get all that communicated to people so that you don't need to be in the weeds. The weeds are a recipe for nervous breakdown. You'll find yourself not only losing sleep, but also getting very frustrated. So the more trust you can have that people are doing the right thing, are doing what fits, what's aligned with your strategy and your tactics and what works, the easier it'll be on you. Now, I've heard, and I honestly don't know if this is true, but it came from I heard it on the radio, so I guess it must be true, that Google recommends that its senior leaders have more than 6 or 7 direct reports. Now, the conventional wisdom is completely the opposite. Don't have more than 6 direct reports. 3 or 4 is more ideal. Google has put some thought behind this, and the reason they recommend that of their leaders is to have the more senior reports you have, the less possibility of you getting down in the weeds there is. You just haven't got the time, so you have to depend on them, and it's only going to work if you've got the right people, if you've mentored them to do the right things, and you've created the right atmosphere where they do. So that it'll drive in that direction. Either that direction or it'll just all fall apart, one or the other. But I thought that was interesting when I heard that, because I'd always kind of subscribed to the opposite, that you're just asking for trouble in terms of the amount of time you're going to take, the amount of attention, etc. But it's all designed to keep you out of the weeds, that idea. Interesting idea. So let's move on to from there to some things related to structure. There are, as your organization grows, as you get bigger, you're going to have to need to create certain policies, procedures, guidelines, rules, and one really important thing is not just to create them, but to communicate them to the organization. It may be to the senior group of the organization, it may be to the entire organization. But my point really is that you can't really run I don't know what the sort of break point is, but an organization which has different elements to it and different components and teams without having some of these kind of things. Some of them are really, when it comes to animal welfare, obviously we have things like adoption policies, we have things like adoption applications, and these all need to be consistent. If you've got people doing it in 2 different places, your adoption team need to follow the same guidelines. And it's really important to have this kind of thing, as you get bigger, written down. When you're a small organization, you can communicate with one another, you can agree on things, or if you're leading just a small organization, you can tell people how you want it. But that's easier to communicate verbally when it's quite small. The bigger it gets, the more complicated that'll be. And also, the more you want to the more you want to make sure that it's clear, it's as clear as being written down. And you'll get more of this. It's inevitable. It's not necessarily that much fun. I mean, I think some people find it fun. I don't personally. I like to leave it to other people, and sure, I check them and make sure they're okay. But I prefer other people to actually do the donkey work of creating that kind of thing. And but I do see the absolute necessity of it, because I don't particularly enjoy writing policies. It doesn't mean I say I don't believe we should have them. Other things like, HR principles and things, then you get into the law, you get into following legal issues. That definitely requires this. Now, it can get very stultifying, this kind of stuff. And really, it's up to you to find ways of making it not stultifying, even making it fun. There are some, I mean, when it comes to HR type things, I don't know how much you know about Zappos, the online primarily shoe selling. I think they sell other things too now. They're based in Las Vegas, and we've had some contact because we're close with them, because we've heard about their really unusual HR principles. I'm not going to go into details, but they have a really unusual HR culture, and one of the principles of it is that everything has to be fun. Well, that's a great idea, and they actually go a long way to make sure it happens. And I think if you don't naturally fit into that, you probably don't belong there. But at Best Friends, we try and make things as fun as possible. I think that's evident from the conference, right? And one of the reasons that we do that, and I'm digressing a little bit here, but since I'm talking about it, I'll tell you, is that this is such a emotionally laden field that we work in. In many ways, it's very painful, right? We're dealing with these disadvantaged animals all the time. We're dealing with animal deaths. I mean, gosh, it's painful. But at the same time, we've got to keep our spirits up. If we don't keep our spirits up, if we submerge ourselves in, the painful aspects, we're not going to be able to achieve anything. There is so much joy that animals bring us. There's so much fun that animals bring us. And so just that kind of light-hearted, fun, enjoyment needs to be a component of everything we do. We'll be more effective if it is. So that is a slight digression, but it probably gives you some thoughts about how you go about things. So, but one thing I put here on the slide, good, clear, and complete. Those are essential things, and we're getting in now to the area of communication. We'll get to that later. One other aspect of this is people. We're talking about people here now, is accountability. Again, this will become more and more of a significant situation as you grow. Some people may be somewhat distant from you. You don't see them every day. When it gets to, to be frank, Best Friends has over 600 employees now. I don't know them all. Some of them come and go quite rapidly. New people come, other people go. They may not have been here for a long time. But I was thinking about this, and I was trying to think back in my life about how many people do I know. It's a difficult question to answer without actually sitting down and counting them up. But I was thinking, in the whole of my life, I think probably the time I've known the most people, known their names, known a little bit about them, know sort of something about them, where they live or what they do, it was about 250 people. And it was kind of it was when I was in the equivalent of high school. And I don't know if that's my limit or not, but I can tell you 600 is way over my limit. So my point really is this, that people are going to be distant from you as you get bigger. I'm not suggesting you're all planning on becoming organizations with 600 people in them, but it applies, at other levels. And so you won't always be there. Now, how do you handle this? Well, it's all about setting a culture of accountability. Making goal setting, for instance. When we talk about accountability, basically we're talking about setting goals for certain projects or achievements, and then holding people accountable for achieving them. If we want to get really down into some, it's not my area, so I regard it as tough stuff, the whole area of performance reviews and, you know, setting your goals and then reviewing them and all of that kind of stuff. It's all important. It's just that it's not very popular. But how do you handle that? The best way of doing it is to really make it suffused through the organization that we believe in accountability. We believe, and that means following through on it. That means if someone isn't achieving their goals, working with them to achieve them. And if they get to the point where they just are so either incapable or just bloody-minded, to use a phrase, that they won't, you know, do the work that is required to achieve it, then they don't belong. But where people do achieve their goals, reward them. You know, all these things build a culture of accountability. And if you're seen, and usually if someone isn't really pulling their weight, if someone isn't achieving their goals, you'll find that pretty much everyone around them knows that. If you do nothing, you're creating a culture of non-accountability. So you have to take action. This is where, you know, the firing bit comes in. If that's not, and if you follow that kind of principle, you will gradually evoke a culture of accountability, and everyone knows that part of what happens when you're there is pulling your weight. So setting goals. Tracking the results, obviously, once you set the goals, and then holding people accountable. That's the essence of it. I'd like to just add one other thing here, which is related very closely to goal setting, but actually gets us into a slightly different area, which is, I have a phrase which I like to use, which is, at Best Friends, we don't set goals, we make commitments. Think about that for a second. Setting goals, you can if you achieve 98% of your goal, you've done pretty well, right? Yeah. I mean, you haven't quite made it, but you pretty much made it. Imagine our commitment in Best Friends is to save them all. Well, this is the point I was mentioning this morning. Okay, so if we save, you know, even take 98%, well, what about that 2%? Are we going to just say, okay, no, sorry, they're gone? No, we're not. We're going to focus all our energies on that 2%. That's a commitment. That's just not letting up. That's saying, I am going to do this. We are going to do this. Setting a goal is kind of different, subtly different. You know, it's certainly making a statement. It's making a statement, this is my goal, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to try my hardest to do. Yeah, it's saying all of that. But you can sort of feel pretty good about getting 98% done. Well, I know you, and I know you endorse. None of you would just ignore those two animals. Of course you wouldn't. So, I like to feel that it's actually commitments that we make rather than goals. But we use the term goals because it's a commonly understood one and it's fair enough. So anyway, that's a slight digression, but it's something I'd like you to think about because it's kind of significant. Moving on, oh yes, we come to a real fun part of this now. Bad vibes. I'm sure you've all dealt with bad vibes. One form of bad vibes is naysayers, people who don't believe in something that you're doing. They don't believe in your whole purpose. They don't believe in some particular policy you've got, some particular aspect of your adoption policy, your spay-neuter policy or something. Don't believe in your spay-neuter protocol. You know, there could be all sorts of things. And they may be within your organization, they may be outside your organization. But if they're allowed to kind of express themselves and be a significant factor in your machine, they're going to cause problems, right? the problems, the main problem that I see them causing, unless they've got a really good point. I mean, you do have naysayers who've got a good point, which you need to listen to. So it's worth listening to. But you'll often find you have some form of bad vibe in your organization, which actually you just need to get rid of, and you need to find a way of getting rid of. When it comes to naysayers, the really important thing is to maintain your focus. Now, we've had examples of situations, and I'm thinking mostly from outside the organization, where people have made a big noise about some aspect of what Best Friends is doing, and not liking it. It could be related to a single animal, it could be a whole policy. And sometimes those kind of people, and it's probably magnified with social media, where it's so possible to express things widely to large numbers of people just by tweeting something or putting something on Facebook or whatever. And we've had examples of people who criticize us for something and make sometimes some pretty ugly noises about what we're doing. And funnily enough, this always seems to happen when it's either the weekend or a national holiday or something like that. And so what do? I mean, it's distressing. It tends to focus, it actually tends to focus your attention. That is, and it may be just one person expressing their opinion. But, no one likes it. You may get defensive in either a really negative way, and defensiveness generally isn't good, or you may just feel that you want to defend you legitimately want to defend your organization against this and straighten them out and do whatever. One thing that I've found with this kind of situation is it's very easy to let it dominate your attention, whether it's, and it may be an individual within your organization who's got bad vibes, or it may be someone outside, but whatever it is, it's very easy to let those things dominate your attention. It's not helpful. And it's usually, it very often, most often I would say, does not have significant long-term consequences, I mean. It doesn't usually affect you in the way that it feels like it affects you when you actually hear it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because it's quite common in our movement. Unfortunately, a lot of people have very sort of nitpicky, critical kind of comments about different things about helping animals. And I'm sure you've all experienced it. I mean, it goes to the extent that new organizations are formed because someone disagrees with someone else. And yeah, I see heads nodding. But really my advice on this is this. It's maintain your focus. It's keep on the straight and narrow, keep on what you really, and don't get sucked into the sort of unpleasantness of these kind of situations, whether it's an individual within. If it is, deal with it quickly. I mean, by all means, try and straighten the person out or deal with whatever the complaint is. But don't waste a lot of time on it, and don't let it derail you. This is just an expression which I like, which is, I think, actually biblical, from the book of Matthew, for those who read the Bible. Shake the dust from off your feet, I think is the quote. What that means is basically what I've been talking about, don't let this kind of thing get you down. Just shake it off your feet and move on. Allow your feet to move on without the dirt on them. So that's what I recommend on all of that. So let's now turn a little bit to the subject of communication, which is so vital in the area of leadership. I've touched on this in a number of ways, but communication, clear and good communication to the organization, and again, this is a subject which is the bigger you get, in a way, the more important it is, because you won't necessarily be seeing everyone, you won't necessarily be talking to everyone daily or however often you do, and you need to have a structure for making sure that communication reaches everyone that it needs to on policies or procedures or where you're going or what you're doing or whatever. And so both making any communication on whatever it is clear and concise and not labored or overbearing or and accurate. Obviously, all of those things is really important. And also positivity, positive communication, and when it comes to managing people and assessing people's performance, build in as much encouragement as you can, positive encouragement to people's, to your communication with people. One of the, on this first bullet point, being positive, Best Friends has built its whole brand on a positive approach to animal welfare. You know, when we started 30 years ago, the most common, particularly in fundraising, way of fundraising was to make people feel guilty, right, about animals, showing horrible pictures of animals. Still happens to some degree, but it's really changed a lot. We felt that was totally wrong. We felt that the best way of gathering support and getting people's involvement and interest and ultimately saving more animals was to communicate positively about them, communicate the positive stories. You know, like we had a wonderful story this morning about Peanut Butter Jackson, the North Chihuahua. You know, what a fantastic story, what a fantastic end result. He had a horrible start to his story. I mean, he had probably 2 hours to live or something, and you know, all this broken body, you know, and it was terrible. But the end result was something which lifts our spirits, which makes us feel better, and which gives us energy to go on and, you know, save the next Peanut Butter Jackson that we encounter, whatever. So this was all positive communication. It's finding the positive angle on whatever you're communicating about. And that doesn't mean running from negativity. It doesn't mean running from things which are going wrong, or but always finding the way through it through positive communication. So I would strongly recommend that. And when it comes to actually managing people, the more positive reinforcement you can give, the more choices you can make to focus on the positive aspects of their performance, not ignoring the negative, cover the inadequacies, but also always have the positive aspects up there, up front. You know, this is what we all live off. We all live off feeling good about ourselves. And a lot of us don't feel good about ourselves all the time. So the more you can give people to feel good about themselves, the better. And finally, on communication, I think it's finally, we've covered this point in the past during this, the power of asking other people. It's a very powerful tool, asking other people for everything that you're doing, asking their opinions. You know, many people in your organizations will have different perspectives than you have. Not just that they have different opinions, but they actually see things from different angles and different experiences. They're involved, deeply involved in certain things which you aren't involved in. You may know about it, but you're not actually doing it. Listen to them. Ask them questions. Asking questions is a tremendously validating way of relating to people. People love to be asked their opinion. Shut them down if they go on too long, but make sure you ask people's opinions, because that adds to the whole relationship that you have. They feel valued, they feel that they're contributing something to the organization, and it's really powerful. So that's a really important part of communication too. And this really is where we wrap this up. I've talked a bit about commitment. I've talked a bit about the importance of making a commitment. Whatever you do, whatever your field is or your area of focus is, and you may be leading a team which is not the entire organization and maybe part of it, and applies just as much to that situation. You need to express both conviction and determination. The conviction that whatever you're trying to do can be done, will be done, that you have the tools to do it, and that if you're missing some of the tools, you know that, and you need to find them in order to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And then determination, the determination to simply work through it, whatever it is the determination to, overcome obstacles, to find solutions. Problem solving is a huge tool here. It's a huge ability which you need to think in terms of. You need to think, okay, we've got a disagreement. We've got something which isn't working out possibly. How can we cope with this? How can we move past it? Do we need to compromise something? Do we need to move around it? Do we need to just barge through it somehow? I'm talking in rather general terms here, but I think you get what I mean. And determination, when you show determination, just as when you show conviction to what you're doing, in a personal way, you will pull people along with you. It's a very attractive thing. It may make demands on them, and if they don't respond to those demands, then again, if it's extreme, you're looking at a situation where those people don't belong. But being able to show both the conviction to your work and determination to get it done is just such a powerful aspect of leadership. You often, and this is related, making bold moves, taking risks, is part of what will get things done. Now this is something where you need sensitivity. I mean, how far do your risks should your risks go? But in order to really make progress and really achieve things and grow and so on, you need to be bold sometimes. You need to take risks. I would recommend when you're in a situation of looking at risk-taking or contemplating taking a risk, do a lot of research. See what the implications of that are as well as you can. See just how much danger you're putting the organization, people, or whatever it is, in if it all goes wrong. And don't overdo it, but be in the mood to move just beyond what you've always done and the way you've always done it, and not moving a little bit further. Push yourself and push your organizations to the point where you are making bold moves, you're taking risk, and you're assessing the results, and you're acting accordingly as a result of that. So this is all part of commitment. It's all part of really believing that you can get something done, and ultimately, obviously, where we stand on this is there. Our commitment, as I said, is to save them all, and we will move in that direction as long as we stand up. So, we've got 3 minutes for any questions. We have a question. Great. Karen, would you mind standing up and saying your name and who you're from? It would be really wonderful if you could do that. And you'll get a mic in a second so everyone can hear you, and I think we can cover this in 3 minutes. I hope we can. Unless you might speak your question for 3 minutes. Go ahead.
I'll make it faster. I'm Karen Green with Cat Adoption Team outside of Portland, Oregon. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about managing up. So as an executive director or CEO,
right,
how you work to lead a board of directors, or if someone is running a municipal agency, how you might work to lead a city council, or other governing body. So the people who the leader reports to, but also leads.
Right. Thanks for the question, Karen. It's an interesting thing which I haven't gone into at all, but it is an important part, and I can't possibly answer it in 2 minutes. Sorry. But no, what I will say is this, though. You've raised a very important point. You're probably going to be answerable to a board. You may be the board yourself. So that's a kind of different situation. But if you're answerable to a board as the leader of an organization, obviously that is a relationship. They've hired you, they can fire you. You need to be very respectful of them. They have the authority to tell you what to do. So as far as managing that, I would say the prime thing is to give them as much information as you can. Always keep them informed, and keep them informed both of facts on the ground and also of your opinions, your ideas, your strategies, your wishes, your dreams. Have good communication, communicate a lot to them so they understand you well. That's it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming. Thank you.